The wolf's eyes caught my flashlight like twin coins of hell, and between us stood a woman I'd never met, bleeding against a boulder in the middle of nowhere, Arizona. I didn't know her name, didn't know that saving her life would trap me in a tribal law older than this country itself. Didn't know that by sunrise 6 Navajo elders would appear at my tent and tell me I now owned a responsibility I never asked for, that I'd become bound to a stranger by something they called ina, a debt that couldn't be paid with money or apologies. They said I saved her life, so now her life was mine to protect, and when I tried to run, they made it clear. Some debts follow you forever, and some roads have no way back. The desert wind carried sand across Highway 163, and Jake Hartley's motorcycle rumbled beneath him as Monument Valley's red pillars rose against the dying sun. He'd been riding since Colorado, running from a construction job that ended badly and a landlord who wanted 3 months' back rent. Arizona wasn't a destination. It was just another mile marker on a road that never seemed to end. He pulled off near Kayenta as twilight bled purple across the sky, parking beside a cluster of juniper trees. The November air already held winter's teeth, and Jake busied himself with his tent, his breath visible in the fading light. Everything he owned fit on that bike. The scream shattered the desert silence. Jake froze, his hands gripping a tent stake. The sound came again, raw, terrified, distinctly human. It came from beyond the ridge, maybe 200 yards north. Every instinct told him to stay put, to mind his business. But the third scream decided for him. He grabbed his flashlight and ran, boots crunching on hardpack as he crested the ridge. His beam caught movement in a dried wash below. A woman in traditional dress pressed against a boulder, and circling her was a wolf, lean and desperate-looking. The animal lunged, and the woman swung a walking stick that caught it across the snout. Jake didn't think. He charged down the slope, yelling and waving his arms. The wolf hesitated, its yellow eyes catching the light. Jake hurled a rock, and the stone cracked against the wash's far wall. The wolf snarled once, then loped into the darkness. The woman collapsed against the boulder, breathing hard. She was perhaps 30, with long black hair and a velvet blouse torn at the shoulder where the wolf had gotten close. Blood seeped through the fabric. "You're hurt," Jake said, moving closer. She held up a hand, stopping him, her dark eyes measuring him with intensity. When she spoke, her English carried the musical cadence of Navajo beneath it. "You should not have interfered, Bilagaana." Jake had no idea what the word meant, but the tone was clear enough. He'd just saved her life, and somehow he was the problem. Jake woke to voices outside his tent and the smell of wood smoke. He'd barely slept, adrenaline keeping him restless until past midnight. Now, pale dawn light filtered through the nylon, and shadows moved across the fabric. He unzipped the tent to find 6 Navajo men standing in a semicircle around his campsite. The eldest stood at the center, his weathered face like carved sandstone, his gray hair tied back with red cord. Jake Hartley. It wasn't a question. The old man's voice carried authority. "I am Thomas Begay, not Ani of this chapter. You will come with us." Jake's mouth went dry. "Look, if this is about camping on reservation land..." "This is about Ina," Thomas said. "Life debt. You saved Ayasha Yazi last night. By our law, her life is now your responsibility." The words made no sense. Jake looked from face to face, finding no humor. "I don't understand. I helped someone who needed help." "That is never all, Mr. Hartley." A younger man stepped forward, wearing wire-rimmed glasses. "I'm Daniel Nez, tribal liaison. Our traditional law recognizes a spiritual bond between the one who saves and the one who is saved. Ayasha is a widow with no male family members. You became responsible for her welfare the moment you intervened." Jake's laugh came out strangled. "That's insane. I'm just passing through." "You live here now," Thomas said flatly, "or you face consequences for abandoning your obligation. We can make it very difficult for you to leave Navajo land." The threat hung in the air. Jake looked at his motorcycle, calculating escape routes. "Don't," Daniel said quietly. "We control the roads. Your bike's license plate is already noted, and Ayesha deserves better than to be treated like a burden you're trying to escape." "I never asked for this," Jake said weakly. "Neither did she," Thomas replied. "You will come to the chapter house at noon. We will discuss what Ina requires. Do not be late, Bilagana. Do not disrespect what you do not yet understand." They left as silently as they'd arrived. Jake stood alone beside his tent, and for the first time in 5 years of drifting, the road offered no way out. The Kayenta chapter house was a low building of tan stucco, surrounded by vehicles ranging from decades-old pickups to newer SUVs. Jake arrived at 11:50, his hands sweating despite the cool air. He'd considered running, but something held him. Daniel Nez met him at the entrance, guiding him to a meeting room where Thomas Begay sat with 4 other elders. And there, at the table's far end, was the woman from last night. Ayesha Yazi looked different in daylight. She wore jeans and a burgundy blouse, her shoulder bandaged, but her posture straight. Her eyes met Jake's for just a moment before sliding away, and he saw something there he recognized, the trapped look of someone who didn't choose this either. "Sit," Thomas commanded. Jake sat. Through the window behind Thomas, red rocks stretched to the horizon. "Ayesha's husband Marcus died 3 years ago," Thomas began. "Truck accident. She has no brothers, no father. Her mother passed last spring. In our tradition, a widow without family is vulnerable. The wolf attack was not random, Mr. Hartley. It was a manifestation of imbalance." "Ina is not punishment," an elderly woman said. "It is restoration of Hojo, harmony. You disrupted a spiritual pattern by saving Ayesha's life. Now that pattern must be made whole. What exactly are you asking me to do?" Jake's voice came out hoarse. "Stay," Thomas said simply. "Take responsibility for her welfare. Work, provide, follow our guidance. In time, if both parties agree, marriage may formalize the bond, but at minimum you will not abandon her." Jake's chair scraped as he stood. "You can't force someone into a relationship." "You're not in the modern world," Ayesha spoke for the first time, her voice quiet but clear. "You're in Dineta, our land, our law." She looked directly at him. "I don't want this either, Bilagana. I don't want a stranger forced into my life. But my people say this is Hojo, and I will honor their wisdom, even if it costs me my peace." The words hit harder than any threat. Jake sank back into his chair. "You have until sunrise tomorrow to decide," Thomas said. "Stay and honor Ina, or leave and never return to Navajo land. Choose wisely." Jake spent the afternoon walking empty roads around Kayenta, his phone dead in his pocket. The November sun hung low and cold, casting long shadows. He found himself at a small trading post, its wooden porch sagging. Inside, an old woman worked at a loom in the corner, her fingers moving through threads dyed deep red and earth brown. "You're the one who saved Ayesha," she said without looking up. Jake leaned against the counter. "News travels fast. Always has." She tied off a thread and looked at him. "You think we're backwards. I think I don't understand." "That's honest." She returned to her weaving. "My grandson moved to Phoenix. Got an engineering degree, makes good money, but he comes back every few months, relearns who he is. You know why?" Jake stayed quiet. "Because being Dine isn't about geography, it's about kinship. Knowing your obligations run deeper than your desires. Marcus Yazi was to all of us. When he died, Ayesha became our responsibility. We failed her. The wolf attack was our shame made manifest." She stood and moved to the counter. "You saved a life. That's a gift, not a burden. But gifts carry weight. The question isn't whether you accept Ina. The question is whether you're brave enough to stop running long enough to find out who you might become. Jake left as the sun touched the western mesas. He rode to the spot where he'd heard those screams. The wash was peaceful now, the boulder just another piece of ancient stone. He thought about 5 years on the road, 12 states, jobs that lasted weeks before he moved on. No friends, no commitments, no one who'd miss him. He'd called it freedom, but sitting in the growing darkness, it felt more like erasure. His phone vibrated, a text from his brother in California, 6 weeks old. "Mom's asking about you again. Would it kill you to call?" Jake stared at the message until the screen went dark. Jake arrived at Ayesha's hogan as the sun broke over the horizon, painting the desert gold and crimson. The traditional dwelling sat a mile from the main road, surrounded by piñon pines. Smoke rose from the central opening. He knocked on the doorframe. "Ayesha?" She appeared, holding a cup of coffee. "You came." "I almost didn't." Jake shifted his weight, his duffel bag hanging from one shoulder. "I sat on that ridge until 3 in the morning, trying to convince myself to leave." "Why didn't you?" "Because you were right. I couldn't mind my own business." He met her eyes. "But also because that old woman made me realize I've been running from KA my whole adult life, and I'm tired of running." Ayesha studied him, then stepped aside. "Come in. Coffee's hot." The hogan's interior was immaculate. A wood stove radiated heat, and the walls were lined with woven blankets and family photographs. He saw Marcus in several, a compact man with laugh lines, his arm around Ayesha's shoulders. "I loved him," Ayesha said, following Jake's gaze. "Still do. That doesn't disappear because the tribe says you're responsible for me now." "I know, and I'm not trying to replace him." She poured him coffee into a clay mug. "Thomas and the elders, they're not wrong about Aina, but they don't see that maybe I was already finding my balance before you showed up and knocked everything sideways." Jake accepted the mug, the ceramic warm against his palms. "So what do you want? Not the tribe. You." Ayesha sat across from him. Outside, ravens called from the pines. "I want to not feel alone. I want someone who understands what K means, even if they're still learning. I want a partner, not a keeper, and I want time to figure out if this situation could ever make sense." "I can do time," Jake said. "I've got nowhere else to be." "Do you have a trade?" "Construction, carpentry mostly, some electrical work. The youth center in Kayenta needs repairs, roofs leaking, floors rotting. Tribal council approved funds but can't find contractors." She set down her cup. "You could start there, earn your place, show people you're not just some Bilagana doing the minimum to satisfy tribal law." "And us?" Jake gestured between them. "You stay in the guest trailer." She nodded toward a small airstream behind the hogan. "We share meals when it makes sense. We talk. We figure out if Ina is wisdom or stubbornness." Her expression softened. "I didn't ask for this either. But maybe neither of us knows what we actually need." He stood extending his hand. "Then let's find out together." Ayesha clasped it firmly. Her grip was strong, her palm calloused. He'd later learn she was a silversmith, her pieces sold in galleries across the southwest. "Welcome to Dineta, Jake Hartley," she said. "Try not to save anyone else's life for a while. We've got enough complexity as it is." He laughed, and the sound echoed strange in his own ears. Genuine, unguarded. As the sun climbed higher over Monument Valley, Jake carried his duffel to the airstream. The desert wind carried the scent of sage and juniper, and somewhere in the distance, Thomas Begay received word that Hojo had been restored. The road still stretched in all directions, but for the first time in 5 years, Jake Hartley didn't feel the need to follow it.